On June 6th, 2023, at about 3:26 in the afternoon, Ogden police officers responded to a call of a violation of a protective order at an apartment complex in the 100 North block of Washington Boulevard. The caller was the protected person in that protective order, and she advised that the suspect, Brian Simonton, who's the individual in the bulletin you've been provided prior to the briefing, was at her apartment, acting strange, acting as if he wanted to kill himself or wanted to be killed, is how it was described, and the caller told the dispatchers that he was known to have a gun. A single patrol officer driving a marked patrol car in full uniform arrived on scene shortly after the call and encountered the suspects, Brian Simonton, walking in the parking lot carrying the handgun. The officer issued verbal commands to Simonton to drop the weapon repeatedly, even calling him by name and asking him to drop the weapon. Simonton did not comply and ultimately raised the handgun and pointed at the officer and fired. Several other officers arrived on scene and went to the area where Simonton was located. We believe a total of 8 Ogden City police officers returned fire at Simonton. Simonton continued to fire at the officers, and a round struck the original responding officer in the lower arm and traveled up through his arm into his upper arm and struck him in the chest. The round didn't enter his chest, but it did cause damage in the area of his chest. Simonton was struck by several rounds of fire returned by the Ogden officers, and he fell to the ground. Simonton did not respond to commands to move away from the handgun, which was still within his reach, and a police canine was deployed to pull Simonton out of reach of the handgun. Officers, once he was out of reach of the weapon, officers approached Simonton and found he'd sustained significant injuries from the gunfire. Medical personnel were summoned, and officers applied emergency medical interventions, but Simonton died from his injuries. We're very pleased that no citizens were harmed in the exchange of gunfire. I commend the victim of the initial domestic violence call for keeping herself in a safe place and calling the police to handle the situation. We believe this could have been far worse than it was. Had the suspect been able to access her, we think it could have had far worse outcomes. Domestic violence is a serious problem in all of our communities. If you know someone or you are experiencing domestic violence, please reach out for help. In Ogden, the Your Community Connection, or YCC, has been serving domestic violence victims and sexual assault victims for decades. They understand the fear and anxiety that results from being trapped in an abusive relationship, and they can help. It is the policy of the Ogden City Police Department that officers will activate their body-worn cameras while on calls for service. There are several body-worn camera videos that were created by this event. It's the policy of the Ogden City Police Department that all police officers involved in uses of deadly force, the incidents will be investigated by the Weber County Attorney's Critical Incident Task Force. In conjunction with that investigation by an outside agency, all body-worn camera videos have been turned over to their investigators. No body-worn camera video footage will be released until approved by the Weber County Attorney's Office, who is handling this investigation. We will work to expedite the release, though. The Ogden Police Department invests heavily in training. I attribute the calm, professional, and highly tactical response of our officers at a very chaotic scene to the outstanding efforts of our training bureau and our exceptional officers. I'd like to close by thanking our partners at the Weber Area Dispatch Center. We are fortunate here in Weber County and Ogden City to be served by a remarkable dispatch center. They showed their level of expertise on this day. The dispatcher was confronted with a highly complex scene that included a suspect firing at and hitting officers and 8 officers on scene returning fire. In addition to that, medical attention were required to be provided for the officer that was shot and subsequently for the suspect. I'll be happy to answer any questions I can, but this is not our investigation. This is the Weber County Attorney's investigation, so I may not be able to answer all your questions.
Chief, just to clarify, you said he raised the handgun and fired, but did he fire directly at the officer?
Yeah, he fired in the direction of the officer. That wasn't the point where the officer was struck. It was later in the gunfire he was struck. That wasn't the original shot that struck him.
But was, sorry, go.
You just implemented that new device that counts shots fired. Was that used in this situation? Do you know how many shots were fired in total?
I don't have any idea how many were fired. I can tell you there were a lot just from reviewing the cameras. There was a lot of shots fired, and I do not know if all those devices were implemented in the guns yet. We've received them, but it's a process of rolling them all out and implementing them. So there's high likelihood that some of them may not have the device in the gun yet.
Chief, was it the suspect, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. Was it the suspect's bullet that went to that officer for sure that you know of?
That's not my investigation. So I can't answer that by saying yes, because it's not our job as the police department to make that determination. From what I've seen, I believe yes that it is, but that is the Weber County Attorney's decision to make. They collect all of the physical data, all of the rounds, all of the casings, and they do trajectories and everything else to ensure that. But I'm gonna leave that for the investigation to be determined. But my belief at this time is yes, that it came from the suspect.
How many officers were present at the time of the first shot?
One officer.
Can you talk about, do you know maybe how many times the officer, you said he addressed him by name, commanded him to drop the weapon? Do you know how long that exchange lasted or how many times he requested that?
Multiple, more than 10. I know just from having viewed it. There was quite a bit of a verbal exchange before the suspect finally got to the point where he fired at the officer initially.
And the 911 call that came in to prompt officers to the scene came from the girlfriend,
Yeah, the person who was protected by the order that was in place, the domestic violence order, yes.
Chief, can you speak to the condition of the officer now?
Yeah, I apologize. I should have mentioned that. Thank you for letting me know. Our officer did receive treatment at McCady Hospital, and he was transported to another facility where he underwent surgery. He's recovered from that initial surgery and has been able to be released to home. He's in good spirits. It is a significant injury. We expect he'll make a full recovery at some point, but it's going to be a matter of, it's going to be a drawn-out process. There's quite a bit of damage done, but we expect to recover
So you
fully.
won't return to duty soon?
No, he wouldn't return to duty. All the officers who were involved in the shooting that discharged their weapons are placed on administrative leave during the investigation, and he would be under that as well. But I suspect his injuries will carry on beyond when the investigation's completed, and he'll spend some more time off.
How many officers? You had 8, or is it 9 total that are on?
No, eight total, including the officer that was shot. That's what we believe. Again, those details are going to be confirmed by the investigation by the county attorney's office. Our investigation here as the police department is now to investigate our own internal policies, procedures, and protocols to ensure that we follow our own policy. But the details of everything that happened to that very chaotic scene will now be put back together by the Weber County attorney's office.
What else can you tell us about the officer? Tell us about his background, his history, how long he's been with the department.
Yeah, we had a wide variety of officers that were at that scene. That officer had in the neighborhood of 5 years of experience, a lot of experience though in different units in the police department. We had officers anywhere from officers who just barely completed their training to officers who have almost 25 years of experience that were at that scene. So it was a wide gamut.
About how much time elapsed between when the officers showed up and when the suspect was immobilized?
I can't really say. I've only watched the video and I didn't count it, so it was a scene that went on for a significant period of time, enough time for several other officers to respond. So it wasn't something that was over rapidly. There was quite a bit of movement in the parking lot and gunfire in the parking lot for at least somewhat of an extended period of time.
Have you found any other, it was quite a large scene with a lot of gunfire going different directions. Was anyone else hurt? Did you find any residual people coming forward saying,
No.
we've got holes in my house and things like that?
Yeah, there's damage to some property there, absolutely, but no one was injured other than the suspect and the officer in the exchange of gunfire. Very fortunate. It was not. There's never a good location to have this happen, but this is a large apartment complex, a lot of cars and a lot of people at a busy time of the day. Also located next to a campus of our area technical college where a lot of people are coming going from. So, yeah, we feel very fortunate that nobody else was injured by the suspect's actions.
Can you speak any more to the suspect? You guys put out this information, photos of him. Was your officer aware of his violent history and the history you listed here?
Only that information I shared in the beginning about what the caller told the dispatcher is what the officers would have been aware of, that he was there either threatening to kill himself or be killed, and that he'd been known to have a gun would have been the only information they'd likely received before interacting with him.
Do you know how much time time lapsed between the call coming in from one of the protective order to the officer arriving to the parking lot and seeing the suspect?
Yeah, and I can't give you an exact time. I just can say anecdotally that the first officer was there pretty rapidly. They were close to that area, so.
So no one went to the house, he just saw him in the parking lot?
Yep, he had the details and immediately, well, he was carrying the gun immediately, so it was obvious of that was the suspect he was dealing with. When he first encountered him, the gun was immediately obvious to him.
When you get a call like that, how does it change the officer's approach when they arrive on scene?
Yeah, well, it changes it in that they obviously want to get more assistance there immediately, and they also want to have whatever other devices available that they may use, like a shield or something of that nature. But as I mentioned in my release, we do a lot of training at the Ogden Police Department. We've invested heavily in our training platform for several years now, and we've invested a lot in our equipment, as you mentioned, the shot dot devices, other devices we're implementing, not just in firearms, in all of our training. And that's why things like this work the way they do and they turn out well, is because our officers are being put through these not exact situations but similar situations time and time again, and as close to as real situations as possible. We're one of the few agencies in the state of Utah that has a Virtua Surround simulator, where we do these interactive drills with an officer with what is a real gun with air cartridges with the actual electric charge in the back of their back, and if they're shot during the encounter, they feel the charge from that, or if they're stabbed, and it forces them to take in all these situations that surround them. So again, it's just that training and a commitment to training that allows these things to work out as well as they do, and just our exceptional officers who just do a great job in situations like this time and time again.
When you're a slightly larger department, when you lose 9 guys for the time being, what does that do for the logistics of day-to-day?
It does change things. We're very fortunate that we've been fully staffed as a police department for several months now. So we have some people available to backfill those slots. Historically, that hasn't always been the case, and it really would have could have potentially caused a problem, but we have amazing partner agencies across the state and in northern Utah. And any one of our partners here in northern Utah, I received call after call from the commissioner of DPS, from chiefs of other agencies, saying, what can we do for you? So if there was any kind of a shortage or a need for help, there would be officers here filling it, but we have those resources, and we just have to shuffle a little bit to get through this.
Can you do any details on the arm of the person that hits the officer to give an idea, because the damage was pretty big, right? Can you give detail like a caliber, or if it was big?
I don't even know. Yeah, I don't even know, and we typically don't. Our job, our initial responding sergeants and lieutenants' job is to stabilize the scene, make sure nobody else is injured and unaccounted for, preserve the scene, preserve the evidence, separate any witnesses, notify that critical response team from the Weber County Attorney's Office, and then let the follow-up investigation go to that outside entity. And so beyond stabilizing the scene, we don't even take to do that kind of an evaluation.
Chief, one more question. Did the suspect, Simonton, ever threaten or harm the protective order recipient in the apartment prior to the exchange?
No, as I mentioned in my, I think I mentioned in my briefing, we commended her for staying and keeping herself in a safe place. She was able to isolate herself in a safe place away from the suspect, where she knew he was out there and he was acting strangely, but she stayed in that safe place, and she called 911 and let us come handle the situation. As I mentioned, I really fear what the outcome may have been if she would have been outside in a position where she would have been available to the suspect.
He never made it into where she
No. All the exchanges happened through protected, through apartments and buildings and such. So.
Do you know if any shots were fired before the officer met the suspect on scene? Did he shoot anything like before?
None that we're aware of. No, we're not aware of any shots until he fired that first shot at the officer.
I was just looking at the timing here and wanted to confirm an arrest warrant was issued on the same day that this all happened?
Yeah, from an unrelated case. So he had an existing arrest warrant for a misdemeanor assault, domestic violence charge that was valid at that time, and at about the same time, a warrant had come out on another case out of Box Elder County with several weapons charges and other charges, and had just been issued. So exactly whether it was in effect at the time, I don't. But the officers wouldn't have been aware of either warrants till afterwards. They were just getting to the scene quickly. Any other questions? Okay, well, I appreciate y'all coming. Thank you.